I'm going to highlight one interesting experiment that I saw really recently, which I think is so fascinating. So this is an example where a blogger slash developer named John Palmer actually launched an upcoming essay as an NFT crypto asset with a pre-sale for the essay token. And so this model basically allowed his essay to be read by the public for free, but also generated significant hype and buzz from the pre-sale model. So basically the essay got minted as an NFT, and then backers could crowdfund the essay in exchange for essay tokens. And then when the NFT got sold, those essay tokens could either be redeemed for the underlying ETH or could be bought and sold and traded on the secondary market. And I think this model was really fascinating because up to now, the way that you would monetize writing was really binary. Either you would put a paywall up and people would pay and read it and get access to it, or you were just unable to monetize it at all. It was free and open and available to the public. And I thought that this model was really interesting because it offered a way to monetize work that remains a public good without having a paywall. And your super fans, or even people who are looking at this as a potential investment, were able to support him as a creator. In general, there's just so many more ways to monetize than ever before for creators. Historically, it's been the case that creator monetization used to be mostly limited to ads and sponsorships, but now there's a trend underway towards direct user pay. So users are paying creators directly for various products and services. And there's a proliferation of different creator monetization platforms, ranging from donations and tipping to subscription for premium content to branded products that creators can design and launch and sell, to services and interactions that they can have with their fans for money, all the way to paid communities. So in the midst of all of these options, how do creators actually decide what to utilize? And how should platforms think about what monetization methods to actually offer to creators? So today I'm introducing a new fit framework, business model fit. So business model fit is basically the best business model that aligns the interests of creators, their audiences, and the platforms themselves. So business models need to ideally align the interests of all of these three constituents and balance between all of them in order to have the best business model fit. There's lots of examples out there of platforms and business models that I think don't have great business model fit, where maybe they're too lopsided and they don't give enough value to creators or don't give enough value to the platform itself. So to throw out some examples, Twitter is commonly cited as an example of a platform that perhaps gives too much value to their users. People are always talking about, like, I can't believe this site is free, and not enough value to the creators, and doesn't take enough value as the platform itself. Whereas on the other hand, you could think of an example like Instagram, where perhaps they're taking too much value as the platform. They're taking 100% of all ad revenue, and they're not giving enough value to the creators themselves. And so whenever things become lopsided and there's misalignment between all three of these constituents, I think of that business model as not being sustainable, or it's not an optimal arrangement, leading to one of the sides feeling exploited or neglected. So diving into the concept of business model fit a bit more. So creators need to align their business models with their own goals. What are they trying to achieve? What's their definition of success? Business models also need to fit the audience of the creators, what their budget is, what their expectations are of the content. And then lastly, the business model also needs to be aligned with the platform's interests. It needs to be aligned with what the platform wants to incentivize and what is needed to make their business model sustainable. Here's an example of where a suboptimal business model can actually translate into the wrong incentives for creators and impact the entire platform. This tweet arose because of a conversation that I was having with Hank Green, the YouTuber, where we were discussing how TikTok and Instagram feel like completely different worlds, and the environments just feel completely different. Instagram is really aspirational. It kind of leaves you feeling worse about your life because everyone is perfect, whereas TikTok is really fun. It's funny, it's very raw, it's authentic. And we determined that it basically stems back to the business model of the two platforms. Instagram doesn't allow any way for creators to monetize directly through the platform, leaving them to go external to the platform to seek out brand sponsors. And so the incentive that they're creating for the creators is that they have to generate purchase intent and cultivate an audience that advertisers would find attractive, and put out content that would engender purchase intent. In other words, make the users feel inadequate with what they have already and want to buy something new. Versus on TikTok with the creator fund, it's rewarding creators that generate the highest number of views, the best engagement. And so as a creator, you're incentivized to make content that feels uplifting, that users actually want to watch. And so in this instance, the lack of a creator monetization model on Instagram can actually impact the platform in a tangible way as well. So you can decompose business model fit into 6 questions, the 5 W's and the H of business model fit. And all of these questions illuminate the suitability of a business model. So let's start with the why. Starting with the why of why the creator is trying to monetize is a good frame of reference to think about how to monetize. This feels like kind of a duh question, like obviously creators all want to monetize because they want to go on vacation and buy nice things, but actually creators all have different goals for why they're trying to monetize. Some of them just want to make enough money to be able to sustain content creation. Some of them want to retire ASAP. Some are trying to achieve world domination and become the next Elon Musk. And so these goals that the creators have inform what business model is the most suitable. Because, for instance, if the goal of the creator is to deepen their relationship with their audience, then perhaps you would allow them to monetize interactions or offer some sort of product or service that allows them to deepen their relationship with that audience. The next question is, how have precedent monetization models worked? What is the ecosystem used to paying for, and how do they usually pay for it? And the reason why like monetization models historically is important to consider in the context of creator monetization is because users have basically been anchored to what something should cost and how they should be paying for it. So in the podcasting world, podcasts have historically been free to the end user and ad supported. And there's been a lot of experiments that have been run around subscription podcasting or paid podcasting, but it's been met with really mixed results, in part because I think it's such a new user behavior and users just aren't in the mindset of having to pay for spoken word audio content. So a consideration of precedent monetization models is important because it's what users are accustomed to paying and it feels reasonable to them. The next question is, who are the fans? Like, what is the composition of the fans? So recently, TikTok had its first creator ever to reach 100 million followers. Do you guys know who that was? Okay. I mean, Paul, you're cheating because you work at TikTok. So it is Charlie. Charlie D'Amelio just made waves by being the first TikTok creator to hit 100 million followers. And it was a pretty special moment. And I think she's like blown past that now. But I think overall, our emphasis culturally right now is on this top line number of followers. There's just like that one single number that gets shown to all of us. And I think that's actually a little bit misleading because that single number actually belies a ton of variance underneath the surface in one's follower base. So last class, we talked about how not all creators are homogeneous. Well, actually, fans are also not homogeneous either. And a creator's follower base actually looks something like this pyramid, the pyramid of fandom, where the largest number of your fans, the largest portion of that 100 million number, are probably casual fans. They like you, they follow you, they're curious about your content, but they're not actively leaned in. This is kind of like me with Kim Kardashian. Like, I follow her on all the platforms. I'm curious about her life, but like, I'm never going to buy Skims. Then the next tier up from there is the active fans. They actively like you. They may be willing to throw you $1 if you ask for it, but they're not like intensely in love with you. And then at the top tier are your super fans. These are the ones who would buy your course for $1,000, or they're willing to buy some really high price item just to show their affinity towards you. And so as you go up this fandom pyramid, there's rising levels of intensity of affinity towards the creator, and oftentimes a higher willingness to pay. And so different creators' fan pyramids look completely different. And this basically illuminates how they should be monetizing and which portion of their audience they can monetize in certain ways. So if you think about the map of all of the different new ways for creators to monetize that, we can actually overlay this fan pyramid onto it. So the blue corresponds with these casual fans, and the casual fans, they're not going to pay anything directly to the creator, but their views on your content can get monetized through ads, or if they see a product that they really like, they'll go and buy that, and the creator will earn affiliate revenue from that. The green active fans can be monetized through donations or patronage models or tipping. And then the orange super fans are willing to pay to get closer to the creator, to spend more time with them, to deepen their relationship with the creators, to join their tribe and to join their communities. And so these different monetization models actually capture different segments of the fan base. And so the blue model will capture all of your fan base, whereas the orange monetization models will only capture a small portion, albeit at a higher dollar amount. And what's interesting is that new business models are arising that can actually extend and create new layers of this fan pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid right now with this janky red layer that I've added, we are now seeing cult fans. These are fans who have a propensity to spend amounts and do things that would actually seem kind of illogical to their non-fans. They would do things like pre-fund your work, even though it's going to be available for access to all. They would perhaps buy multiples of your work, just like those BTS fans we talked about last time. They want to own the original digital asset. They want to donate money to other people so that those people can also buy your product. They might buy things just to show off that they're a fan of yours. So these are like the cult fans who are willing to spend an insane amount doing things, buying things that other people might find illogical. And then at the bottom of the fan pyramid, there's now this new layer of creators are being able to earn money from speculators and investors who probably don't even care who the creator is, but who see an opportunity to benefit financially. And so they might actually spend a lot of money for the promise of financial gain, but they don't actually have any affinity for the creator themselves. And what's interesting is that both the top and the bottom layers of this fan pyramid are now being newly unlocked by crypto business models. All right, so let's move on to the next question of business model fit, the what. So what is the type of value that's being offered? What is the content type? So each of the different content types and the user value drivers that I've listed here actually monetize in different ways. So who can tell me in the comments on Zoom how Twitch typically monetizes, how a Twitch creator monetizes? Tips, bits, subs, ads and subs, donations. Exactly. Yes. So entertainment live video will often monetize through subs, tipping, bits, things that really capitalize on those moments of delight in a live context. Because the outcome of the stream is unknown, you can actually impact what the streamer does by tipping in real time. So that type of content is really suited to a tipping model. How about educational audio content like audiobooks? You guys can answer in the chat. Subscription, credits, yeah, subscription, paywall, exactly. So for educational content, it's usually monetized through paying upfront for it, a la carte, or through a subscription. So basically the takeaway here is like different content types will actually deliver value differently, and so they are suited to different business models. For instance, asynchronous video is a really great way to spark purchase intent and to like just increase the depth of the user's understanding about something. And so asynchronous video is really conducive to monetization through ads, sponsorships, affiliate links. Whereas live video that's entertaining, there's moments of delight that you can capitalize on through virtual goods and through tipping, and you can actually influence the outcome of the live video that way. There's also this really interesting tension for platforms and for creators on the choice between price discrimination of various segments of fans and capitalizing on the high value that you give versus simplicity of the monetization model. So these are two charts that I took from a recent interview that Mario Gabriel, who's a blogger and a writer and the CEO of The Generalist, he recently did an interview with Alex Danko and shared these two charts of monetization on the left-hand side versus how value is delivered on the right-hand side. Basically, these charts show that there's a mismatch between how email newsletters are monetized today on the left, which is through this like regular subscription, linear, constant price where $19 is getting deducted from the user's credit card on a monthly basis versus how value is actually delivered. So on the right-hand side, you can see in month 1, 2, and 3, the value that the reader is deriving from the newsletter is relatively low. Maybe these newsletters are kind of meh and like you don't get much out of it. But then in month 4, suddenly like the newsletter delivers such a key insight that leads to a new startup idea, a new strategy idea, like a new hire, a new partnership, whatever it is, that leads to extreme value that the reader gets. And that value doesn't get capitalized on through the subscription business model. And so the takeaway here is that I think it's difficult to balance value and capitalizing on extracting enough value with the idea of simplicity. And so you have to align your business model with the value that's being delivered and make sure that whatever price you charge is in line with the value that's being delivered, but also to balance that with simplicity to the end user. The next question is when. What stage of the life cycle is the creator in, and when are you hitting them with this business model? So in our last workshop, we had looked at this version of the creator life cycle, but in actuality, this version of the creator life cycle where it's very sequential, going from creation to audience building to monetization to managing and growing a business, I think it's a little bit incorrect. And it should actually look something like this, where monetization is on the other completely orthogonal axis, because different monetization methods can actually kick in at different points in time during the creator lifecycle. So for instance, donations can be utilized and be meaningful even at a small scale of followers. And then later on, you might layer in something like advertising once you've built an audience. For a lot of segments of creators, they can't access advertising revenue until they get to a certain number of followers. For instance, on YouTube, you need at least 1,000 subscribers. And for podcasts, you need to have a certain minimum number of downloads per episode in order to get sponsors. And then later on, you might layer in branded products once you're really big, because physical products have like minimum order quantities that you need to hit in order to make it worthwhile. And so the point here is that all of these different monetization methods are applicable at different points in time during the creator lifecycle. But also remember that creators are not homogeneous, and there's so many different types of creators, and there's no single creator identity. And that implies that the monetization path that they follow is going to look really different depending on who they are. So a podcaster's path might start with donations, and then they might go to advertising, and then they might layer in a paid community, whereas newsletter writers often go directly to subscription and then a community. Recently, there was a podcaster who went from Spotify and had a Spotify contract, but broke that contract to go to Patreon. Do you guys know who that was? Okay, you guys are so on top of the creator economy news. Okay, I'm not surprised. It's Joe Budden. Yes, you're right. He's like a hip hop podcaster. So he recently broke his contract with Spotify and is now on Patreon, and he talks about how basically Spotify felt really exploitative and they were just using him for his audience. And he wants to build his own like standalone business on Patreon. And then the last question to inform business model fit is where? Where is the user coming from? Where is the creator coming from? What are the available monetization methods to them? What sits upstream and downstream to the platform that you're building? And depending on where in this funnel you sit, there's already some paths that are emerging that are normalized and accepted for creators to monetize. So for instance, YouTube to Patreon is already like kind of a common path for monetization where YouTubers will build an audience and then layer in direct monetization from their users from Patreon. This was actually the genesis story of how Jack Conte started Patreon, was he wasn't making enough from ads on YouTube, and so he got his fans to pay him directly. Another path that's becoming increasingly common is reality television to Cameo. So reality TV stars will get paid per episode, and then after the season ends, they'll go on to Cameo and monetize their fans directly. Another path that's emerging right now is TikTok to YouTube. So TikTok creators who aren't making enough from the creator fund or from live streaming on TikTok will go to YouTube, try to build up a library there and to monetize through advertising. And so a consideration of where the users and creators are coming from and what monetization models are already available to them and how they're not sufficient for the creator is important to consider when thinking about monetization models. Okay, I'm going to pause there for Q&A.
Yep. We have a question from Paul M. And then we're going to go to Zach after that. Zach Steltz. So Paul, then Zach.
Do you guys want me to read it?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen this at YouTube. I've seen this at TikTok. Followership is a public, metric that we show to creators. Obviously, on the inside at these tech platforms, it's not a huge. It doesn't have the same significance or weight, obviously. And even across platforms, we all know that it's apples to oranges, the comparison. Yeah. YouTube versus Instagram versus TikTok. I think it's a bit antiquated. Obviously, it's really hard to change that. So my question was, do you think followers as a metric is sort of due for an overhaul, or is it the way that we talk about it? I don't know. It's a big question, but I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think where this becomes a real issue is when you talk to advertisers and brands who are trying to figure out like what's the conversion ratio of what I should be paying per CPM on YouTube versus TikTok versus some other platform, because to your point, like a view here is not the same as a view there, and a follower here is not the same as a follower there. I don't know exactly how to change it from a consumer perspective. I think from a consumer perspective, seeing the total number of followers is a good proxy for how popular someone is. Where I would like to see platforms go, though, is on the creator side, better illuminating for them what their fan pyramid looks like. So like the fan pyramid that I had shown, the issue that I see in the ecosystem today is that like creators don't actually know how many fans I have in each of these buckets. Like we can probably all tell each other, like we all know off the top of our heads, like how many followers we have on Twitter. But if I were to ask you guys, like how many super fans do you have? I don't think any of us have any idea unless we were to try and like test through trial and error how many people are going to sign up for our course or like subscribe to our newsletter. So I think helping like tools and platforms that can help creators better understand the breakdown of their own fans, almost like a creator CRM, would be really useful.
I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. Zach S.
Yeah, thank you. Lee, you created this new triangle at the top for cult fans. Would you equate that to like whales in the gaming industry, or is cult fans even above that classification as well?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So first of all, like all of these segmentations are, I mean, no one like, it's not black and white. It's not like there's a clear delineation between one and the other. It's a spectrum of fandom, and fans probably move in and out of these buckets throughout their lifetimes as well. I think cult versus super fans, the line that I would draw there is like super fans are willing to pay a high amount in exchange for some tangible value. Like they're willing to pay for a course, even if it's really high price. They might pay for you to be their coach or to do consulting with them. Like there's a high dollar value there, but it's still logical and reasonable. And the line is like the cult fans are willing to spend above and beyond that for something that other people might view as illogical. And so if the whale is motivated by status, like I want to show off how much money I have by showering someone with gifts, then yeah, I would classify them as a cult fan.
Thanks, Zach. We're
Thank
gonna
you.
move to the next section, Lee.
Cool.
Mhm.
Let me find it. Okay, great. So with all of this in mind, I'd love for you guys to do a breakout session. This is like a very timely question that I want you guys to discuss, which is for Clubhouse as a platform, how should they be letting creators monetize? And also, how should they be enabling monetization for themselves as a platform? And those business models can be the same, they could be different from each other, but I'd love for you guys to discuss those questions. And so we're going to put you guys into breakout rooms for 10 minutes to quickly introduce yourselves, say where you're from, what you do, and then discuss and recommend a strategy for how Clubhouse should enable creators to monetize, how Clubhouse itself should monetize, and then when we come back, share a point of person to share your guys' recommendations. Cool. Awesome.
Great. Breakout rooms are open. The prompt is sent in the workshop questions and the chat.
Hit join the button.
Yeah, click join.
CTAs are important. We'll say what to do.
Hi, everyone. Please click join if you're not.
It's so cute.
Does this happen every time people get lost?
Well, it's not lost. It's just maybe someone's like not paying attention for a second, or
I feel like kind of like on a first grade field trip where you constantly have to like count people and see if they're still there.
oh yeah, my
I'm gonna reset the room. PTR. Okay. So welcome back, everyone. So for those of you guys who were the anointed ones chosen by your groups to share your answers, please type in that you were the chosen person into the chat and I'll call on you guys. Cool. We'll just start from the top. Connor. Does Connor want to go and share his room's answers?
Wow, I didn't know I was chosen. Sure. So there were a couple different discussions that happened. One was around kind of the replacement of the conference model, right? So, a lot of these are professionalized conversations, not exclusively, but a lot of them are. And so doing exclusive events, ticketed prices that are monetized directly through the platform itself, in which Clubhouse takes a cut, and they're, either private events or otherwise. Was one area that we discussed.
Got it. Okay, so taking over the conference model and charging for access to different rooms. All right, who's Team Thatch?
Hello, that's us.
Okay, great.
Abby and West here. You want to read off our notes?
Sure. So we also talked about the paying for access to events, but we also talked about subscriptions to clubs, with Clubhouse taking a take rate basically off of whatever the club is charging. Also just within a room, paying for VIP seating. So getting your profile on the list. And then we also had the idea of paying for better audio quality, or just kind of ensuring if they went to like an ad, Clubhouse could go to an ads model, and then you paying like freemium to get rid of the ads. Sort of those models as well.
Paying for a closer seat to the stage is really fascinating, because obviously, like in a symphony or a ballet or whatever, like in a real life performance, like you do pay different prices for different seats, and that like corresponds to how much status you have, like a box seat versus in the pit with the orchestra, like that's a different price. And even though the sound is not different in Clubhouse, it's really interesting how that could still be a status symbol that gets monetized.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
Sergey in our room brought that up around like it's kind of a platform, like basically your position in those seating positions allow you to build clout on the platform.
Yeah.
So it's like monetizing clout. It's
And
kind of
since
interesting.
your profile is so valuable, everyone's like looking at the profiles of the people on the screen.
Absolutely.
It's like
Yes.
advertising, even if you're
Right.
there on behalf of your company or yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, you can actually harvest followers by sitting
Yep.
close to the top, as
Right.
Bernie said. I see him doing that all the time. Okay, how about Megan Kelly?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Our things have already been said, but ours were around tipping. So, giving back to the creators who are speaking, and then also access to smaller rooms. I think one of the nice things about Clubhouse that has kind of eroded as it got bigger is when it was originally super small, it was like you could be in a room with 10 people and it was you and, Oprah or whoever it may be. And you could easily have a one-on-one or a small group conversation. And now when it's so big, it's very hard to have that kind of access and those more intimate conversations. So having a little bit more gating in around smaller group discussions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think tipping is a really interesting one because tipping obviously works really well for live video. And I think a lot of people tip for the desired recognition from the host. Like they want to hear a thank you from the host and feel affirmed by them. But in a Clubhouse discussion where you just have the audio feed, it's hard to have that same element of recognition without interrupting the whole conversation, right? Because it's audio only. And so I wonder how you would design the tipping to be able to recognize the people who tip, but still, still not interrupt the actual core value that the users are there for.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like you start to see the people who are tipping you each time, and then for like the next session, you find a way to like incorporate them. But I think that's an interesting pain point to also work through.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I'll call in one last person, Allison Kent-Smith. Allison, you're muted.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, did I get nominated and I just don't know it?
I think so.
I wanted you to elaborate on your last comment that you said.
The comment about artifacts.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting to think about not just in the moment, but what happens after. So monetizing artifacts, roll-ups, summaries, curation.
Yeah.
So the actual output could be a way to charge people, depending on what.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always thought that there could be an option to monetize on the creator side and allow creators to pay for being able to capture the recording and to be able to record a room and export as a podcast, like basically premium creation features.
Yeah, it seems like that's happening now on the black market, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. All really great ideas. Thanks, guys. Okay, so let's move on. So essentially, the next topic that I want to talk about is how the creator economy is a total paradigm shift from the world of traditional employment. And making a living as a creator looks totally different from how people made a living before as an employee. So under a traditional employment agreement with an employer, 100% of one's earnings came from your employer. So you only had one revenue source and that was your job. In the creator world, that is not so common, and it's much more common for the creator to have multiple different revenue streams which kick in at different points in their life cycle, as we showed. So you go from the pie being one thing to a pie with lots of different slices. Most creators are what Hunter Walk calls multi-SKU, so I'm going to utilize his term because I really like it. So this creator, as you can see, makes income, I think, in 7 different ways. Can anyone guess what this creator does or what platform they're primarily on? Okay, you guys got it. It's YouTuber. It's a YouTuber. And you can probably tell that because there's like YouTube AdSense, in-video sponsor slots, Those are kind of the two big tells, plus maybe like affiliate revenue. But basically, this creator is Linus Tech Tips. He's a YouTuber that has 12.6 million subscribers on YouTube. He is a tech YouTuber. And so he makes money through a variety of different ways. He sells his own merchandise. He has a platform that he built himself called Floatplane, which is basically a platform that allows him to share premium content for a window before it hits YouTube. And then he does affiliates, affiliate revenue with Amazon, YouTube AdSense, sponsored videos, other sponsored projects, and another bucket. And this kind of composition of revenue is very common. So here's another example of another creator in a completely different industry. This is Tiago Forte, who is a course creator, blogger, coach, consultant, like very multi-hyphenate because he has so many different sources of income. He shared his sources of income over the last 4 years, and this is what the pie chart looks like. So he makes most of his income from corporate trainings in purple and online courses in orange. But what's really interesting is he also shared how he spends his time, which is on the right-hand side. So his time spent is actually a lot more evenly distributed across all these different activities than how he makes his income. Can you guys think about and tell me why these two circles look so different? Like, why do these two pie charts look so different? And if Tiago is making so much money from corporate trainings in purple, like, why doesn't he just do more corporate trainings all day? Why is he bothering to spend his time doing things that don't earn as much? Okay, so lots of comments here. I love how the comments in Zoom have turned into like a Twitch chat. Okay, so he has to build his audience. He enjoys some things. He wants to make money while he sleeps, potential for earnings growth. Exactly, you guys got it completely correct. So basically there's potential, a lot of potential reasons, but basically like some types of income enable other activities. So for instance, if you do a lot of writing and blogging, which may not make a lot of money, that blogging helps to build your brand, which helps you access consulting projects and access the conference speaking circuit. And then other types of income are more scalable than others. Maybe he actually wants to do more corporate trainings, but there's just not that many corporate trainings to be done. Some income streams are also more enjoyable than others. And as we said last time, creators aren't just optimizing for monetization. They actually want to do things that they enjoy. And so a lot of these activities could just be things that he really enjoys doing. And then there's activities that will actually help you up-level other types of income. So for instance, a lot of people write books, not because they're going to make much money from the book, but by writing a book, they can charge a lot more when they do speak at a conference, or they can get much more lucrative consulting opportunities. So that's why the time does not map to the income sources. I also want to just emphasize that with all of the proliferation of different monetization methods for creators, these different monetization methods actually compete with each other to some extent. They all take up mental space, if not active energy and time from a creator. And in the creator world, the world is now filled with more potential jobs than they can ever take. And so they have to really limit themselves and choose and pick which ones are best for them. So if you go back to Tiago and Linus's chart of how they make income, both of them, despite being in completely different fields from each other, both of them had a maximum of 7 SKUs that they offered. Both of them were making income from 7 different things, 7 different activities. And so this leads me to propose a number. I'll call it Jins Number in reference to Dunbar's number. So Dunbar's number was like the theoretical maximum number of relationships that a single person could have, which is 150. There's also potentially a maximum number of SKUs or activities for monetization that a creator can undertake, and that's about 7. And this is just what I tend to see in the wild. And it basically suggests that there's a cognitive limit to the number of different ways that you can monetize, because a creator is a person and there's a limit to how much they can take on and how many times they can context switch and focus on different activities. So as I'm doing this course, a lot of publishers have reached out to me to write a book, and I'm just like, there's no way I can ever write a book right now. So we have a maximum number of SKUs that we can all offer. And maybe that number of SKUs goes up over time with better tooling and more automation, and like people hire teams to do it. But this tends to be the way that I see it playing out today. And so what are the implications of this Jins number for creator products and creator companies? I think the implications are, one, you need to increase your share of wallet or share of income that you comprise for the creator. If you can make sure that you're one of the larger buckets of income on their pie chart, then that reduces the chance that the creator is going to completely walk away from that and deprioritize that. Secondly, I think it's great to try to make the earnings as low effort or ideally as passive as possible. If the earnings is really low effort, then that also reduces the risk that the creator just decides that it's not worth it anymore and stops doing that activity. You could also try to bundle together audience building and monetization so that creators don't have to go elsewhere. So remember, in the creator's hierarchy of needs, creators are often willing to trade off short-term monetization to build a bigger audience base because they view their audience as an asset that they can leverage in the future. And so if as a product you can help do both, then that means you're just more indispensable to the creators' lives.
Yep. Lee, we have a question about Jins number.
Yes.
From Justin Moore, if you wouldn't mind.
Hey, Lee, what's up?
Hi.
So is the SKU limit for solo creators or also if they have a team?
I think it's both, because both of these creators that I just referenced have teams.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know. I should probably undertake like a research project and like maybe hire an MBA to go survey people. But this is like also anecdotally what I see in terms of like browsing people's links and bios, like how many links they have, how many different, platforms they're on. Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks.
Of course. So in general, this is a metric that I commonly think of when I think about how do creators prioritize which ways to monetize. There's basically a metric of return on investment. And return on investment in the creator world is slightly different than for the normal person world, where creators care about return in terms of audience growth, revenue earnings, but also reputation and audience love. And that's divided by how much time, effort, and cost they have to sink in order to earn those things. And you can basically summarize that framework into this 2x2 chart of earnings on the x-axis versus effort on the y-axis. So when I look at a new monetization tool for creators, I often think about like, what is the earnings versus effort ratio of this thing? Like, where does it fall on this grid of effort versus earnings? And if it's really high effort but low earnings, that's probably not a spot where you want to be. So on this chart, you can see like doing a podcast is often high effort but low earnings. That's probably not so good. That probably is the reason why podcasts as a market is like growing linearly rather than faster than linearly. There's monetization paths that are low effort but also low earnings. There's high earnings, low effort ways to monetize for creators, which is probably where you want to be. So Cameo and OnlyFans are oftentimes referenced by creators as relatively low effort, but also high earnings. And then there's things like this course, which were high effort for me to create, but also quite high earnings. So there's lots of different ways that these monetization tools could be mapped into this diagram. So let's flesh out this chart together. I'm going to name a few names of different creator monetization products, and you guys tell me which quadrant they fall into, and I've named them here. So type your answers into the chat. So starting with Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is like this tipping tool that you embed onto your website to get tips from your audience. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of 3s, 4s. Yeah. So 3s and 4s. Okay, I buy that. I was going to put it into 3 because I think it's low earnings, low effort, because the prices that you can charge for tipping is just typically not high. The information is out there, it's accessible by everyone, so people probably aren't going to tip you very much. But if you have a big audience, it can actually add up to a lot. How about a paid Substack newsletter? 2. Okay, everyone seems to think it's 2. I would agree. It's 1 or 2, definitely. So it depends on like audience size again. But if you have a big audience, it can be pretty high earnings. It's still high effort to write a Substack newsletter for sure. It's a long form blog post. How about writing a book, like actually publishing a physical book? Okay, everyone thinks it's 1. Some people think it's 4. I don't think a book is ever low effort. So I'll go with 1, which is high effort, low earnings. What about brand deals? As an influencer getting a brand deal, where would you put that? 3, 2. Okay. So yeah, I'm seeing answers basically all over the place, which I agree with. I do think it's a little bit messy, and some of these get a little complicated because what does effort actually mean? Like some of these monetization methods you can't actually even do unless you've reached some audience size. And if you need a big audience in order to unlock something like a brand deals or to unlock a paid newsletter, like, does that count as high effort, even though once you get there, it's relatively low effort? So obviously it's a bit more nuanced than just earnings versus effort. And there's a barrier to certain types of monetization. There's a barrier to entry. For instance, there's a barrier to entry for developing a course. Like first you have to spend years developing an area of expertise before you can even package that into a course. Other dimensions of monetization are how passive versus active it is, how much ongoing versus upfront effort there is, how scalable the income is. In order to do this course again, I'm going to have to spend additional time teaching another group of folks. What portion of my audience can I monetize to the previous fan pyramid chart, and marginal cost to earnings. And then we also have to remember Alan Lau, the CEO of Wattpad's words from last workshop, which is that creators aren't just solely money optimizing machines. They actually care a lot about different factors beyond just revenue and monetization. So creators are quite distinct from businesses in this way. They're not just profit maximizing. They have a reputation to maintain. They care about things that enhance their reputation versus detract from it. They want to deepen their relationship with their fans rather than erode their trust with their fans. Here's an example of a creator who perhaps made a lot of money from a brand post, but who lost a lot of trust in the process. So this is actually an influencer that I really love. Her name is Emily Schumann. She writes a blog called Cupcakes and Cashmere. It's a fashion and food kind of blog. And on Instagram, she did this like very bizarre branded post with club crackers where she went to a smash room with her team and they all took sledgehammers and destroyed everything in the room. And this was designed to be like a promotion for club crackers, very weirdly. And she lost 2,000 followers after this post. And she got completely destroyed in the comments. Like people thought this was literally the quote dumbest and most bizarre post I've ever seen. So wasteful. And so this just goes to show you that I think creators care about and since then, I haven't seen another Club Crackers post from her, by the way. So creators aren't just trying to maximize earnings. They care about their brand and lots of other intangible factors. And so another version of the 2x2 quadrant chart could be earnings versus brand impact. People would rather do brand accretive activities rather than brand detractive activities. And so we had said before that writing a book was very high effort but low earnings. So why would anyone ever write a book? But actually writing a book is very brand accretive. So people still write books because in our society, it's just viewed as an amazing thing if you've managed to write a book. In Silicon Valley, angel investing is one of the ways of monetizing that we all think of as really brand accretive, and sometimes it's high earnings as well. So the takeaway here is creators are not just all about monetizing and maximizing earnings, they care about a lot of other factors too. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to continue on, and we'll save Q&A till the end. Cool. So let's reset the room and talk about the intersection of creator monetization and the creator middle class. We can't really talk about how creators could make money without addressing the fact that most creators just aren't making much money today to be able to sustain themselves. And in the digital world, income inequality gets exacerbated as a result of technology. And the best creators can scale to millions of followers and have their content be watched millions of times without ever having to actually exert more time or effort or energy. And so content has these winner-take-all dynamics, and content actually has network effects too. We've all experienced feeling left out when we haven't watched a certain movie or haven't followed someone's post on Instagram. And so we go and watch that thing just to be able to participate in this collective societal conversation. And so in the content world, especially in the digital content world, it often leads to winner-take-all dynamics and the absence of a creator middle class. A paper that I cite all the time is one that was written a full 40 years ago by an economics professor at the University of Chicago, Sherwin Rosen, who really presciently described how the superstar phenomenon would become more pronounced as a result of technology. So he basically argued that in markets with heterogeneous providers, where every provider is non-fungible and is of different quality, the demand would accrue disproportionately to those on top. So he gave the examples of, hearing 10 terrible singers does not add up to a single good performance. And also, if like a doctor is 10% better at saving lives, you wouldn't expect him to just get 10% more patient demand. You would expect him to get literally all of the patient demand. And this is exacerbated by technology because technology lowers distribution costs. All of a sudden, instead of the best singer being able to only address a physical concert hall and capture all of their revenue, you can all of a sudden distribute that song over the internet, over a streaming service, and that song could be consumed by all of the consumers on the planet. And so the best performers in a certain field, the best creators, can address an unlimited market, leading to these stats on the bottom. So today, there's a missing creator middle class, and most creators on these platforms aren't making a sustainable income for themselves. Backing up a moment, it's useful to consider where the real life American middle class came from, and those factors of what actually drove the real life middle class in the real world can help inform how we think about supporting a middle class in the digital creator world. So I just want to emphasize to everyone that a strong middle class didn't just happen in the real world organically, naturally, out of nowhere. It was built, and it was built through policy. So in the late 1800s, during the Industrial Revolution, there was actually extreme income inequality, where wealth accrued to the capital owners, the owners of factories and means of production, while most laborers toiled for very little wages, working 90, 100 hours per week for very little wages, and children worked next to adults for even less wages. And in the early 1900s, all of that was reversed when the US invested in policies that actually created prosperity and led to the growth of the middle class. And those three factors that I think extremely contributed to the growth of the middle class were unionization, regulation, and just the composition of work. So in terms of unionization, in 1935, we passed the National Labor Relations Act, which guaranteed the right of employees to unionize and to collectively bargain for better working conditions. And by the 1950s, about 36% of Americans belonged to unions. There was also regulation enacted to protect workers. So in 1938, we passed the Fair Labor Standards Act, which mandated the 40-hour work week, enacted overtime pay. This is how we got minimum wage. This law also abolished child labor. And then we can't forget the fact that the composition of jobs used to be completely different. It used to be the case that jobs existed entirely offline in the real world, and services and manufacturing jobs that were performed IRL naturally meant that there was capped scalability. So there was a natural ceiling on how much work one could do and how much earnings one could accrue, because doing one extra unit of work, doing one additional job, entailed putting in more effort and more time. And we can see that through looking at the composition of the most popular jobs in every income band. And so I've shown a snapshot of the most popular middle class jobs, which are things like truck drivers, primary school teachers, nurses, sales supervisors. These are all jobs where in order to earn more, you actually have to put in more time, more effort to take that extra task. So what are the digital counterparts to all of these things that could support the creator middle class? In terms of unionization, I predict that we're going to see more unions arise in the creator world that could demand, for instance, lower take rates from platforms, revenue sharing from advertising, or new monetization methods that the platforms introduce. And recently there was the news that influencers could join the Screen Actors Guild, which is the top Hollywood labor union, which represents about 160,000 film and television actors. And this, by joining the union, it covers, for now, it covers brand deals and how unions, how influencers work with brands on brand deals. But I think this is going to grow to encompass a lot more collective bargaining with the platforms on various different issues. I think in terms of regulation, we could probably look to Prop 22 for a hint of what's to come. So last fall, Prop 22 was voted on in California to address how we classify delivery workers and drivers for Uber and Lyft and all of those gig companies. And the outcome of Prop 22 was that they could continue to be classified as independent contractors, but they had to be provided with new benefits by all of the platform companies. And those benefits included getting paid at least 120% of minimum wage, getting a health insurance stipend if they drove a certain number of hours per week. The companies have to pay medical costs and some of the lost income for drivers if they're hurt while driving. And I think a counterpart to this is going to happen in the creator world, because today creators are neither employees nor are they independent contractors of these platforms, but creators are doing a ton of work and spending probably what is equivalent to full-time hours creating content for these platforms, ultimately driving the revenue and the valuation of these platform companies. So I think in the future, we're going to see conversations about worker classification for creators and labor rights issues that culminate in new classifications and regulations that apply to content creators. What do you guys think would be some of the big topics of discussions if creators formed unions to negotiate with platforms? Algorithms, ad split, revenue share, pay equity, take rates. Yes, absolutely. Benefits. Yeah, right now there's like such a wide variance between the take rates that all of the platforms take. Like Twitch takes 50% of like creators' revenue. Some other platforms take 10%. And right now creators just really don't have a seat at the table in order to push back or to advocate for themselves on what the take rate should be. So I definitely agree. Moderation, trust and safety, I think is another big one for creators too. There's also there's also different business models that we can implement to help the creator middle class. So a few of the ones that I'll just call out here and describe a little bit more. Pre-funding of projects and work. So what I mean by this is historically, this was how artists were compensated and supported for their work. Usually they had commissions that they took, or there were patrons who directed them on what exactly to produce. And so creators actually had knowledge and awareness of what the demand was and what they should make. Today, creators are oftentimes flying blind on this element, and they're figuring it out through trial and error, and they might make a video that took a ton of resources but get very little views. And so I would love to see models that pre-fund creators for work, or their audience like pre-funding or telling the creator exactly what they would like to see and to be able to support them in doing so. Bundling, we're already starting to see this, especially in the newsletter world, where a group of content creators will actually pull together their risk and their upside and share revenue with each other. I think platforms can give equity to creators in order to help grow the creator middle class. So today, creators, when they use a certain platform, they own their own upside and they get their upside in the form of their revenue share or the followers that they can monetize in different ways, but they don't capture the value that they're giving to their platforms. For instance, like when I write a hit piece on Substack, I'm generating a ton of views on the Substack platform and probably growing like the valuation of that company and generating additional writers who sign up, but I don't get to capture that value as a single individual writer. And so I'd love to see more platforms giving their actual creators a share of the equity in the underlying platforms themselves. Universal creative income. So I'd love to see platforms tiding creators over during that transition from side hustle to main hustle and helping the most vulnerable segment of creators to be able to support themselves during that time. And then lastly, integrating with multiple monetization tools to seamlessly enable multi-SKU income. We had talked about how most creators are actually making their revenue in this multi-SKU way. I think that is the most realistic path to a middle class of creators. Like, I actually don't think that most creator platforms are going to support a huge base of creator middle class on its own platform, but the multi-SKU income could be a path for how those long tail of creators are able to cobble together income from different sources and actually have an income that is more middle class. So for instance, on this chart, you can see the distribution of different YouTube channels in terms of how many followers they have. And this orange band, which looks like a line because it's so thin, is the share of YouTube channels that has over 100,000 subscribers. So for this tiny orange band, these are probably the creators who can earn their full income from YouTube. But for everyone else on the YouTube platform, they're probably going to achieve the middle class income by cobbling together lots of different SKUs and earning income in lots of different ways. And the way that platforms can support this is by enabling them to more easily go multi-SKU, helping them to integrate these different monetization tools, pointing them to which products they should offer to their audiences, illuminating who their followers are, and which followers fall into which element of the fan pyramid. I already talked about this, but basically platforms need to give creators more visibility into how exactly to monetize, because today creators just don't know what their fandom pyramid looks like and how many super fans they have, how many cult fans they have. And so they're trying monetization methods all throughout like this entire spectrum without a really informed approach. And finally, supporting the creator middle class obviously goes beyond just implementing certain business models. And product-wise, there are features you could implement or entire companies that you could build to empower the creator middle class. This is a company that I think is taking a really interesting approach to building the creator middle class. It's called PairPop, and it's a marketplace for TikTok native collaborations. So creators with more followers are duetting creators with fewer followers and charging for it. And after the duet happens, what inevitably occurs is that the smaller creator who paid for that duet grows a ton in terms of followers, and they can take that bigger follower base and monetize through lots of different ways. And so they're paying for exposure and audience building, basically. So anyone who is larger can monetize from those who are smaller, propelling the next generation of creators. And then lastly, the point that I want to leave everyone with is, for all of the emphasis on creator monetization right now, and there's just so much buzz around how creators should be able to make a living, which I agree with, I also want to emphasize that creators are not all about the money. And we should really shift our thinking from just paying creators with dollars and cents to shifting to this mindset of what is the creator's total comp package. So how many of you guys chose your current job solely based on how much it pays and picked the job that paid the most? Like, maybe show of hands. Like, no one. I've never picked the job with the highest pay. I've probably accidentally done the opposite throughout my life. But, you know, just as we do, like, we care about a holistic range of things. We care about how much it pays, obviously, but we also care about learning. How much can we learn from this job? Who our teammates are? What are the benefits? What are the perks? How's the food? How's the corporate cafeteria back when we still went into the office? How does it fit into our work-life balance? And creators care about a much more holistic range of different things beyond just compensation. And so the last thing I'll leave people with is the fact that creators aren't solely motivated by money, and there's lots of non-monetary incentives in order to get creators bought into the platform and doing things on the platform. There's affirmation and recognition that they're incentivized by. There's exclusivity and prestige, being the first to access something. There's community. They want to be where their followers are and where all of their friends are. There's fun and joy, and then there's peer pressure and FOMO. Like, just to drive this home, like Clubhouse has paid exactly $0 to creators so far, and yet creators are continuing to use the platform every single day and hosting all of these amazing rooms. And that's because that's where their communities are. There's fun and joy just in the content creation itself, and there's an element of FOMO and the community that drives them to come back. And so it's not just about creator monetization. And I think right now there's actually perhaps an overemphasis on creator monetization, and paying creators is kind of like the lazy way to overcome a lot of product shortcomings. But I want us to all take like a more holistic approach to attracting and retaining creators. And I'll pause there for questions because that was my last content slide.
Okay, we have so many good questions in the workshop that I basically telling people to please bring these to discussion group because they're really thought-provoking. So I just want to say excellent questions, everyone. So first on deck, I wanted to call on Travis Fisher, who posted a visual, but if you could describe your question in words.
Sure. So I think this was going back to the low effort versus high ROI and the different like means of monetization. And I was also thinking about it in terms of the platform and the type of content and how expressive it is. And so like something like just sending out a tweet or Facebook post is not very expressive, whereas you can still low effort to produce audio content. So I guess I was curious, like how much would you say like the expressiveness and the art form like is a factor that goes into thinking about monetization and these type of things?
Sorry, say more. What do you mean by like artistry? And
so if you check out in workshop questions, there's a visual that'll probably make it more clear. But I'm kind of looking at it like there are certain platforms that are really low effort and really expressive, but like don't have a huge potential for ROI in terms of either growing your audience or in terms of monetarily. And then it's kind of like this Venn diagram, and I don't think it's perfect, but I was kind of trying to,
makes sense.
Yeah.
So ROI is kind of like the tangible value that you're giving to the audience. And there can be things that are really expressive, but low ROI for the audience. Yeah. I think monetization is kind of like orthogonal to ROI. I think there's a lot of things that we pay for that aren't giving us that much like tangible value, but we still pay for them for the joy of consuming them. Like I think all of the fine arts, like ballet, going to the symphony, going to a concert, are things that like they don't have ROI, and we don't think of them that way. But we think of it as like how this is an experience that transcends my everyday life, transports me to a completely new environment, opens my eyes to something completely new, makes me feel something. And I think that has value to consumers, and consumers are willing to pay for that.
Thanks, Travis. And Lee, you should definitely check out the graphic he posted.
I did. Yeah.
It's really nice. Next, Chelsea Oswald, if you're on.
Sure. Yeah. So my question was similar to how people on the outside view cult leader followers. Is there an ethical conversation to be had around cult fans? And my question just stems from people like my younger siblings, who I know if they were attached to a creator would probably give like all of their allowance to these people. And I just wonder like if it's right or wrong or how we feel about
that. In general, I take the very laissez-faire approach of like people should spend their money however they see fit, unless they're like addicted to something and it's actively harming them. But I think, there's plenty of purchases that I've made throughout my life on things that other people would view as completely illogical. And I remember after getting my first paycheck from my first ever job, I like went to the Saks flagship on Fifth Avenue in New York and bought myself something completely ludicrous. So I think like whatever brings people joy should be whatever they spend their money on. And like, who are we to judge that?
Cool. Fair. Thank you.
Great. That's all. We'll close out.
I'll answer the other questions in the chat. I'll follow up with you guys in the Slack. Thank you so much, everyone. And then, okay, so I think I had a couple more here. So just a quick recap of today. Feel free to screenshot this, or I'll also share the slides afterwards. But we talked about a lot of things. We talked about how there's a trend towards direct pay, the 6 business model fit questions. We talked about how creators are mostly multi-SKU and earning income in a variety of different ways and piecing it together. We talked about the framework of ROI and effort versus earnings in terms of how creators prioritize different monetization methods. And lastly, we had this discussion about the creator middle class and how business models and features can actually support that. And then here's just the terminology review from today, which capture all of the concepts that we discussed today. Curious if anything, like what was the best part of this entire workshop, or what really stands out as being especially thought-provoking or interesting? Everything. Okay, thanks guys. Thank you to my cult. Appreciate it. Create a comp package. So basically everything. Okay, love to hear it. Okay, so the second part of this week's assignment, which you guys will get in writing, is to there's 2 options that you guys could pick from. One is to either brainstorm 5 ways that a platform company, for instance, the one that you're working on, or I also list a few examples in the sheet that you could choose from, how they could increase the number of middle class creators and support the middle class on their platform, or classify your startups through all of the dimensions and considerations for monetization methods. And then we'll be back next Tuesday, where Justin Moore, one of our esteemed students, is going to be giving a guest workshop on his experiences as a creator and walking you through his day in the life as a YouTube creator. And we'll also be talking about the brand side of the industry during that session, because this was all about direct user monetization.